Welcome to this walkthrough of the Solve Game, which is the new addition to McKinsey Solve assessment. In this video, we'll go step by step through the game, explaining how to approach each stage and maximize your performance. Before we start, if you haven't done so, you can watch our other two videos we recorded on McKinsey Solve, where we provide an overview of the game and a detailed walkthrough of each game. In fact, our game walkthrough video became the most popular content on the internet. So with this new addition to the game, we thought we should update you on the latest version of McKinsey Solve and solve together the new Solve Game using Prepmatter's McKinsey Solve simulation. If you'd like to experience the game firsthand and practice to get better at all the games of Solve, check out our website. Before we dive in, a quick note. The simulation I'll show you was independently created by Prepmatter for educational and training purposes. Let's get started. If you're new here, Prepmatter helps candidates land consulting interviews and secure offers with resources for resume building, online assessments, and case and fit interviews. We also offer one-on-one coaching for personalized support. Check out our website for more and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat with aspiring consultants. Let's first update you on the new structure of the McKinsey Solve game. There are 3 games in total: Ecosystem Creation, Red Rock Study, and the Sea Wolf, or it's also called the Ocean Cleanup or Ocean Treatment game. Excluding the tutorials, you'll have 35 minutes to complete each game, starting first with the Ecosystem Creation, then Red Rock Study, and finally the Sea Wolf. To give you some more background about this new game, McKinsey rolled this new game as a pilot to a very few candidates in mid-2024. At this time of recording this video, the Sea Wolf has been rolled out to the majority of the test takers. So there's a good chance you will see this game too. I've spoken with many test takers, and the common theme is that the Sea Wolf game is quite complicated. The instructions seem to be a little confusing, and candidates don't always know what they need to do to perform well. I'll first explain to you the entire gameplay using Prepmatter simulation so that we understand this new game. And then I'll solve it with you and share our tips to maximize your score in the actual assessment. The new game, Sea Wolf, comes from the name of the oceanic laboratory, which researches and treats contamination sites using a treatment composed of some microbes. You may have heard of Ocean Cleanup or Ocean Treatment. They all refer to the same game. In the Sea Wolf game, you'll perform 4 key tasks for each site, and there are 3 sites in total. I'll show you the game dynamics for the first site only, since the tasks required for the other 2 sites are pretty much identical. If I were to summarize this game in one sentence, I'd say that your goal is to select the right microbes to clean up contaminated sites. To do this, you need to perform 4 tasks. First, setting microbe characteristics. Second, categorizing microbes. Third, selecting a prospect pool. And lastly, submitting the treatment. The good news is that you'll first go through a comprehensive tutorial so that you can familiarize yourself with the interface and the tasks. Let's start with the first step, setting microbe characteristics. Let's check the layout of this page. On the left, you can see the task instructions. It's extremely helpful to always have it with us, since the game is quite complex. The characteristics are grouped as attributes and traits. 3 attributes are permeability, mobility, and energy. 4 traits are aerobic, phosphorus removal, light sensitive, and heat resistant. Just note that in the actual assessment, you can also see different attributes such as adhesion and speed, and different traits like bioluminescence and pressure resistant. But the idea is the same. The microbes we'll see later in the game have these 3 attributes with varying values and 1 trait. And on the right-hand side, you will find Site 1 information. This details the needed range of attributes and desired and undesired traits of the microbes to treat the contamination. Your first task is to select 2 microbe characteristics to program into the database. This can be any combination of attributes and traits. As you can see, the attributes can be chosen with an interval of 2, while traits have a simple on and off button. So, why do we need to select those characteristics? This is not explained well in the game. We know that the characteristics we'll choose will not influence the microbes we will be categorizing in the next step. The game states that the characteristics will be programmed into the database to select the initial prospect pool, which is the 3rd step. Simply, the characteristics we'll pick should impact what microbes will be shown to us when we review the initial prospect pool later in the game. But based on what we hear from the test takers, the initial prospect pool has a rather random selection of microbes, They don't seem to differ based on what characteristics we pick at the start of the game. Having said that, it might be a good idea to pick attributes with an interval rate similar to the Site 1 information, or pick a trait that's provided either as desired or undesired in Site 1 information. Once we select the characteristics, we move to the second step, categorizing microbes. We'll be provided with 10 microbes, and our task is to review them and categorize them into Site 1, Site 2, or return to the database. By now, we should be familiar with Site 1 information, its attributes and traits. But this time, you're also given an insight into Site 2. One characteristic is revealed. The goal is to pick microbes that fit best to each site. Just note that you won't find the perfect match, but there are some rules of thumb you can follow. For a microbe to be considered as acceptable fit, it should ideally fall within the range for 2 attributes and avoid displaying the undesired trait. Let me illustrate this over a Prepmatter simulation. Say Site 1 characteristics are permeability 2 to 4, mobility 8 to 10, energy 4 to 6. The desired trait is light sensitive, and the undesired trait is aerobic. And we have Site 2 inside, the energy range is 4 to 6. Let's look at our first microbe, Nereschella. Permeability and mobility are out of range. Even though energy is within the range, I shouldn't move it to Site 1. Since it's within Site 2's energy range, I'll move this into Site 2. Moving to our second microbe, Aesturga, permeability as well as energy are within Site 1's range. And since this microbe doesn't have aerobic as the undesired trait, we can move it to Site 1. I hope this makes sense, and we'll spend more time on this task later as I'll walk you through this assessment in detail. Also, based on our interviews with test takers, you don't need to worry too much about having a similar distribution of 10 microbes in the current site, next site, or return. In some scenarios, you may only have 1 or 2 microbes in the next site or the return pile. After categorizing 10 microbes, we move to the next section, selecting a prospect pool. We are already given 6 microbes, and our task is to select a single microbe from a set of 3 microbes to be added to the prospect pool. And we'll repeat this task 4 times until we reach 10 microbes in our prospect pool. Let's discuss how to select the best microbe each time. First of all, we should eliminate any microbe that has an undesired trait. Second, we should choose a microbe that fits most of the attribute ranges. While it's not a must-have, if that microbe also has a desired trait, that's a plus. Let's look at an example in Prepmatter simulation. In this case, we should eliminate the first microbe as it is heat resistant. Comparing to the other 2 microbes to each other, Aprophyllum has 2 attributes that are within the range of Site 1, permeability and energy, while Abyssania has only 1, energy. Aprophyllum's light-sensitive trait is also a plus, so let's choose this. I hope this makes sense, and again, you'll watch the full walkthrough later in this video where we'll pick 4 microbes. Let's move to the last task, submitting the treatment. Out of 10 microbes in the prospect pool, we will need to select our final 3 microbes that will form the treatment. So how do we decide on the final 3 microbes? This is perhaps the most challenging part of this assessment. Our final combination of 3 microbes should be selected in a way that maximizes our treatment effectiveness score. The goal is to arrive at a 100% score, but in some scenarios, there may not be a microbe combination that is 100% effective. In this case, we'll need to aim for 80%. You'll receive a 20% score for each of the 3 conditions. First, the average attribute of the 3 microbes should be within the range of the current site. Since there are 3 attributes, you can potentially get 60% from this condition. Second, none of our microbes should have an undesired trait. Even if one of our microbes has it, we won't get 20%, and rather we'll get 0%. Lastly, our microbe combination should have at least 1 microbe that has the desired trait. To make sure that you're clear about the scoring criteria, let me show an example of the final feedback form that Prepmatter simulation provides at the end of the Solve Game. After you take this assessment, you'll encounter 3 tables that detail your selection and its efficiency score, as well as the most optimal outcome. For instance, in Site 2, the recommended solution has an 80% efficiency score, while in Site 3 it is 100%. This confirms what I've just mentioned earlier, that not in all scenarios can you reach a 100% score. Let me show you how the score is being computed by looking at Site 3's recommended solution. The average permeability score of 3 microbes is 4, which is within the range of 3 to 5. So we receive 20%. Next, the average mobility score is 5, which is between 4 and 6. Hence, we get another 20%. The last attribute is energy. The average energy is 6.33, within the range of 5 to 7. Thus, we get another 20%. Moving on, this microbe combination has at least one microbe that has phosphorus removal is a desired trait, so we get another 20%. Lastly, none of these microbes have an undesired light-sensitive trait. Hence, we receive 20%, totaling up to 100%. Now that we understand better the scoring criteria, let's go back to where we left off in the last task. We'll need to pick 3 microbes based on the criteria we've just discussed. If you watched our other Solve Game videos, you must know already that at Prepmatter, we don't advise using Excel solvers. And instead, you can just take notes manually. I suggest you create a table just like this, where you put 3 attributes, leave 3 rows for your microbes, and the final row where we sum up your microbe traits, as well as multiply required attribute ranges by 3, so that you don't worry about taking the average of each value each time. I'll illustrate this with an example later in the video, where I solve the game. Just bear in mind that we can always remove the microbes from our selection before submitting the treatment. So we can always play around with different combinations until we know that we picked the right combination that gives the best outcome. Once we submit the treatment, we'll move to the site 2 and then site 3 to complete these 4 tasks again. The only difference is that before we begin setting the microbe characteristics, we'll need to sort our bookmarked microbes from the previous site and allocate them to the current site or put them in the return pile. Once this is completed, we follow the same process as before. Alright, now that we understand this game better, let's go through an example in Prepmatter simulation. As you may know already, our simulation includes all 3 games: Ecosystem Creation, Red Rock Study, and the Sea Wolf. If you'd like to see a full walkthrough of the first 2 games, you can watch our other videos. In this video, I'll walk you through the Sea Wolf game. Alright, let's select the Sea Wolf in task 3 to get started. Let's go through the tutorial as well. You're responsible for researching and treating 3 different contamination sites. For each site, you will identify 3 microbes, whose combined characteristics, when averaged, create a treatment that best fits the given site profile. Great! As we discussed earlier, we have 4 steps: setting microbe characteristics, categorizing microbes, selecting a prospect pool, submitting the treatment. This page is where we'll set the microbe characteristics. On the left, we can see the microbe characteristics. We need to choose 2, which can be any combination of attributes and traits. Our selection will not directly affect the microbes we will be categorizing. It will influence the initial prospect pool. That's clear. On the right, we'll see the required range of attributes, along with the desired and undesired traits we must consider to effectively treat the current site contamination. Okay, the next page is about the second task, categorizing microbes. Microbes have 3 attributes and 1 distinctive trait. In this section, we will see 10 microbes. We need to review their characteristics one by one and assign each microbe to the current site, next site, or return them if they do not fit either site. For a microbe to be considered an acceptable fit, it should ideally fall within the preferred range for 2 attributes and avoid displaying the undesired trait. Great! Moving on to the next section, this is where we will perform the 3rd and 4th tasks, selecting a prospect pool and submitting the treatment. The instruction explains the 3rd task. Your initial prospect pool is comprised of 6 microbes and is influenced by your previously selected characteristics. You're tasked with selecting a single microbe to be added to the prospect pool from a set of 3 microbes. You will do this 4 times. Moving to the 4th task, we have a reminder of the treatment effectiveness rule. Let's read it. The effectiveness of your treatments depends on the average attributes and collective traits compared to the site information presented in the right corner. Treatment effectiveness will be decreased by 20% for the following: each average attribute out of range, having 1 or more undesired traits, having no desired trait. There may not be a microbe combination that is 100% effective. There is one last page in the tutorial. When you begin site 2, start by reviewing and sorting the microbes that were previously assigned to this location. Once you've completed this step, follow the same process as before. Define microbe characteristics, categorize the microbes, create a prospect pool, and submit a treatment. After completing site 2, repeat the same steps for site 3. Perfect! Now that we've gone through the tutorial, we are ready to start the assessment. Since the tasks are repetitive across all 3 sites, I'll only solve it for site 1. Since our simulation is dynamic, Once you get access to it over Prepmatter, you'll have the chance to solve it for all sites, and each time you will encounter new microbes and new values, so you can practice as much as you like. Alright, we can find the instructions at the bottom of the screen, which is quite helpful. I'll pick one attribute and one trait on the left. It might be a better idea to pick permeability or mobility, given their range is at the extreme, 8 to 10. I wouldn't pick energy as its range is 4 to 6, somewhere in the middle, which may make it harder to sort out the microbe combination later in the game. In terms of the traits, I'll pick the desired trait of light sensitivity. I could have chosen phosphorus removal too, but I wouldn't want to see microbes having this trait later in the game. Let's move on. In the second section, we need to categorize these 10 microbes. Let's not worry about having an equal distribution among the current site, next site, and return. I'll pick the current site if at least 2 out of 4 attributes and traits match site 1. I'll move microbes to the next site if they're not a good fit for site 1, but they have a desired trait of aerobic. Or if those microbes don't fit well at all to any of these sites, I'll put them into the return pile. Let's start. The first microbe is Varibacter. Its permeability is 9, between 8 and 10. Its mobility is 6, which is lower than 8 to 10. And its energy is 5, which is within 4 to 6. Lastly, it's light sensitive, which is a desired trait for the current site. So this microbe meets 3 out of 4 requirements. Let's move it to the current site. Next microbe, Confluspora. Its permeability is just below 8 to 10. Its mobility is within the range. Its energy is within the range too. And lastly, it's also light sensitive. Just like the first microbe, it satisfies 3 out of 4 requirements. So let's put it in the current site. As you may have noticed, this task isn't difficult. Let's move to the third microbe. At first glance, its characteristics seem similar to the first 2 microbes. Permeability is just below the range. Mobility is 9, right in the middle of the 8 to 10 range. Its energy is more than the range of 4 to 6. It's also light sensitive. Actually, this microbe meets 2 out of 4 requirements. I still prefer to allocate it to the current site. Let's move on. Looking at our fourth microbe, its permeability is 7, not ideal. Its mobility, 10, great. But its energy is only 3. It has a desired trait of light sensitive though. Overall, it meets 2 out of 4 requirements. Similar to the previous microbe, I'll move it to the current site. Alright, Rhenicaldis, our fifth microbe. Permeability is 7, lower than 8 to 10. Mobility is within the range of 8 to 10, but energy is above the range of 4 to 6. And its trait is aerobic, which doesn't fit site 1. This microbe only meets 1 requirement. Then the question is, should we move it to the next site or return it? Looking at site 2 in site, the desired trait is aerobic. Since our microbe also has this trait, I'll move it to the next site. Next, Vallicella. Permeability is 7, not ideal. Mobility as well as energy are within the ranges of site 1. But it doesn't have the desired traits. Overall, it meets 2 out of 4 requirements. This microbe is a little tricky as its trait, aerobic, is the desired trait of site 2. But I wouldn't move it to site 2 because it already has 2 attributes that meet the range of site 1. So let's move it there. Alright, Limencola. Permeability and mobility are within the range of 8 to 10. Great. Energy is lower than 4 to 6. And it doesn't have the desired trait. Similar to the previous microbe, its trait aerobic is ideal for site 2. However, since it already meets 2 attribute ranges in site 1, I'll move it there. Next, Rupensis. Permeability and mobility are out of range. Energy is within 4 to 6 though. Great. And it has the aerobic trait. This microbe could be a better fit for the next site, as it only meets 1 requirement of site 1. And its trait is desired in site 2. Next microbe, I won't bother to pronounce it. Its mobility and energy are within the range, and it has the desired trait of light sensitivity. I'll allocate it to the current site. Let's look at our last microbe. Permeability is within the range, and so is mobility. While energy is out of range, it also has the desired trait. It's an easy decision. Let's move it to the current site. Overall, we moved 8 microbes to the current site and 2 to the next site. If you had any microbes that wouldn't fit any of these sites, I would have moved them to the return pile. As I mentioned earlier, given the dynamic nature of Prepmatter Solve simulation, you'll always encounter new scenarios, and the distribution of microbes may be totally different. Moving to our third task, we need to select 4 microbes to add to the prospect pool. If you remember earlier in the video, I've introduced you to the treatment effectiveness rules. To maximize our score, I'll try to pick the microbe that fits best to Site 1 characteristics. Shigella's permeability, mobility, as well as energy are within the range, and it also has a desired trait. This is a no-brainer. Let's add it to our pool. We now have 3 new microbes. Let's go over them one by one. Celspira has permeability, mobility, and energy within the range. And similar to the previous microbe, it has the desired trait. This also meets all 4 requirements, so we can add this to our pool. So far, our job has been easy. This new set of microbes might be more challenging though. Let's go over each one of them. The first microbe's permeability is below the range. Mobility is below the range as well, and energy meets the requirement. Its trait is aerobic, not the one that's desired, so overall 1 out of 4 conditions are met. Moving to the second microbe, the trait is already an undesired one, phosphorus removal. This means if we choose this microbe in our final treatment, we'll be penalized by 20% at the end of the game, so I'll skip this. The third microbe has a permeability of 8, which is within the range. It has mobility and energy values below the range. And its trait isn't a desired one, so overall it meets 1 out of 4 requirements. So should we choose the first or the third microbe? It won't make much of a difference, but looking at 8 microbes we already have in the pool, the energy values seem to be overall high. So I'd like to pick a microbe that has a low energy value. So let's go ahead and choose the third microbe. Lastly, we're looking at our final set of 3 microbes. The first microbe doesn't seem to have any of its attributes and traits meeting Site 1 characteristics, scoring 0. The second microbe has permeability as well as energy within the range, scoring 2 out of 4. The third microbe's permeability and energy values are within the range, but I wouldn't pick this as its trait is the undesired trait, so let's pick the second microbe. Let's move to the fourth task and read the instructions at the bottom. We need to select 3 microbes whose average attributes and collective traits most effectively match the site information. This selection will represent our contamination treatment. Great. Earlier in this video, I've suggested creating a table for our 3 microbe selection. Let's draw it together. At the top right, let's write permeability, mobility, and energy. I'll leave 3 rows empty where I'll input the microbes later on. And then we'll sum the selection up and compare it to Site 1. I'll just multiply the Site 1 attribute ranges by 3. So permeability should sum up to 24 to 30, mobility to 24 to 30 again, and energy 12 to 18. Okay, let's go over the microbes. I'll first see if any microbe has phosphorus removal trait, so I can eliminate them. None of these microbes have it. Alright. We also need to make sure that at least one microbe we select has a desired trait. Since there are plenty of microbes with light-sensitive traits, I won't worry about this yet. I'll just check at the end. Let's start with Parapeus and check one by one if they meet the attribute ranges of Site 1. Parapeus's only mobility seems to be in the range, so 1 out of 3. Leucophytium has mobility and energy in range, so 2 out of 3, great. The third microbe has permeability and mobility within the range, again 2 out of 3. Varibacter, its permeability and energy meet the requirements, so 2 out of 3. Vallicella, mobility and energy values meet the requirements, so 2 out of 3. Moving on to Lemoncola, it has permeability and mobility in the range, so 2 out of 3. The last 4 microbes are the ones we've chosen earlier. Shigella seems to meet all of the attribute criteria, so 3 out of 3. I'm happy to move this up now. Next, Celspira. Again, its permeability, mobility, and energy meet the requirements, so 3 out of 3. Let's move it up too. Next, Plamicides. It only meets one requirement, permeability. The last microbe is Mazodacea. Its permeability and energy values are within the range, so 2 out of 3. Alright, Let's put the microbes we've chosen to our table first. Shigella, 8, 9, and 6. Zoospira, 9, 10, and 4. Summing those two values up, 17, 19, and 10. So the next microbe we'll choose should ideally have 7 to 13 permeability, 5 to 11 mobility, and 2 to 8 energy. Let's glance through the remaining 8 microbes and check if any of these have all these attributes within these ranges. Starting with Parapeus, 7, 9, and 8. They all meet the needed values. Great. We can choose this. Let me also check the next microbe, Ligophytium, 7, 8, and 6. Again, all criteria are being met. We could choose this too. Glancing over the other microbes, it seems all of the microbes meet the required values actually. Since we picked the first two microbes, Shigella and Zoospira, quite well, it made our job quite easy. The last check I'll make is to ensure that we have at least one microbe that has a desired trait. And in our selection, all of them do have it. Great, I'm confident we'll get a 100% treatment effectiveness score. Let's summarize our treatment. As mentioned, given the repetitive nature of 3 sites, I've only gone through the first site. But in our Solve simulation, you will have the chance to go through all 3 sites. And at the end, you'll receive a report that shows how well you've done in this game. Let's look at our results. On the right, we can see our submitted treatment. As expected, our values are within the expected range. And we have at least one desired trait and no undesired trait. So we get a 100% treatment effectiveness score. On the left, you can find the recommended solution. Since this scenario has multiple correct solutions, we're finding an outcome that's closest to the average values, but it won't necessarily bring a higher score. So you can just follow the strategy I followed earlier. Great! That concludes our video today. Feel free to visit Prepmatter to learn more about this assessment and get access to play the full game, including the Seawolf. Best of luck with your preparation.